Letitia Hawker has more.
Firefighters battled throughout the night to extinguish the fire that began after the museum closed to the public on Sunday night. The 200-year-old institution, which is part of Rio de Janeiro's Federal University, contained 20 million items, including some brought to Brazil by its Portuguese rulers at the beginning of the 19th century.
It's our history that was stored here, our scientific history, our academic history, the heritage from the imperial period. It's an irreparable loss.
The museum was also home to a 12,000-year-old human skeleton, the oldest found on the continent, as well as dinosaur skeletons, fossils, and a meteorite found in 1784. A local fire chief said experts will be brought in as soon as possible to salvage what they can from the ashes.
We're going to have the participation of museum employees. It will be a slow process so that we can, who knows, recover fragments, something that could still have historic value.
A museum curator was allowed to enter Monday to collect what remained of the museum's meteorite exhibit so the artifacts would not be confused with the charred remains of the building.
They let me enter because I could recognize the pieces. I knew where they were, and I could recover some of them from the ashes.
Some of the collections were stored in another building, but most of those archived in the museum are believed to have been destroyed.
It's a tragedy. Yes, it is. We have to go through a period of mourning, but we have to think, what now? It doesn't help just to cry.
Museum Director Alexander Kellner said the federal government's help is needed to aid in recovery efforts.
Brazil can't lose its history.
Many Brazilians blamed the government for failing to secure funds needed to maintain the museum, and they came out Monday to express their anger. The devastating fire hit one of Latin America's oldest and largest museums as Brazil battles economic recession, high unemployment, and violent crime. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Chinese President Xi Jinping offers $60 billion in financing for Africa and writes off some debt for poorer African nations. China has denied engaging in debt trap diplomacy, and while speaking at the opening of a major summit with African leaders, Xi promised development that people on the continent could see and touch. VOA's correspondent Mariama Diallo reports.
Addressing African leaders in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping said the new package would include $15 billion in aid, along with interest-free and concessional loans and special funds for China-Africa development. And he pushed back on accusations that China was engaging in debt trap diplomacy.
Government debt from China's interest-free loans due by the end of 2018 will be written off for indebted poor African countries, as well as for developing nations in the continent's interior and small island nations.
He says his country is determined to not impose its will, nor interfere in Africa's internal affairs or attach any political strings when offering support to the continent.
China will also expand its imports from Africa, especially for non-resources products, and will facilitate African financial institutions' bond issuance in China.
The package is in addition to an earlier pledge of $60 billion the Chinese president announced at a previous Sino-Africa summit in 2015. Speaking at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the focus is on making tangible improvements to the quality of life for Africans.
In the values that it promotes, in the manner that it operates, and in the impact that it has on African countries, FOCAC refutes the view that a new colonialism is taking hold in Africa, as our detractors would have us believe.
China has loaned about $140 billion to African countries between 2000 and 2017, according to data from Washington's Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Fall armyworms are on the march across Africa. Agriculture experts say the pests, the larvae of a type of moth could cause more than $13 billion in crop losses this year. To stop them, scientists are researching pesticides, landscape management methods and genetically modified crops. Faith Lapidus reports on an effort to find a sustainable approach that does not use pesticides.
Armyworms have been found in more than 35 sub-Saharan African countries in the past year and are now threatening millions of farmers in Asia after the first reported infestation in India. They mainly feast on maize, but they attack 80 other crops, including sorghum, cotton, rice, and sugarcane.
It's a really serious threat. It's been estimated that it could cause 20 to 50% crop losses of the maize crop, which is the main subsistence cereal crop which the farmers and the population in general are relying on for their food supply.
At Keele University in England, Toby Bruce and his team are taking a multi-pronged approach to fighting the pest.
We're looking at the crop variety, seeing if we can get more resistant crops. Then secondly, we're looking for repellent intercrops that can be used as a kind of push to push the pest away. And then we're also looking for attractive track crops. That's the third thing, so you can divert the insect to another area away from the crop. And fourthly, we're trying to increase the abundance of the natural enemies. So these are the predators which attack the pest.
They're hoping to amplify the chemical that plants release when they're attacked by armyworms. The pest predators tune into that.
They use those odors for finding their prey, and we want to improve that so that we can have varieties that are better at attracting these natural enemies and increasing the biological control that way.
Meanwhile, African farmers are removing the pests by hand and using homemade remedies like a solution of water, pounded chili pepper and salt to repel the worms. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Herders in Kenya find rich pastures and water in their drought-stricken terrain. The device also tells them places to avoid to reduce encounters with wild animals. Faith Lapidus has details.
In Kenya's Bubisa village, Ali Gufu and his companions lead a herd of camels from a watering site to a grazing camp. The 42-year-old father of three inherited nomadic pastoralism from his forefathers, but he cares for his animals with a 21st century tool, a smartphone app called AfriScout.
Initially, we used to travel a lot by ourselves looking for pasture, but from February this year, we have started knowing AfriScout, whereby some of our guys know how it is used, and that information is helping us. We can now get pasture without much struggle. Now we are coming from the water point, and we are going home early because we know where the better pasture is.
AfriScout was designed by Project Concern International, a U.S.-based nonprofit organization. It estimates Africa's 225 million pastoralists are on average losing a quarter of their herds each year. The app helps direct them toward rich pasture and water and away from carnivorous animals and other sources of danger.
They're able to know where to find better pasture, where to find water, and where there are no diseases.
Competition for grazing land sometimes led to fatal inter-community clashes. But since the herdsmen started using the app 6 months ago, there's been a dramatic reduction in violence and a surge of positive collaboration. They've set up grazing committees that have drawn up a year-long grazing plan. In one Maasai village, the elders used the app to subdivide their pasture land into permanent settlement sections and an open community grazing field. By encouraging planned grazing patterns, PCI official Brenda Wandera says the system also helps reduce the impacts of climate change.
So through the AfriScout application, pastoralists are able to see how the rangelands are looking like, and in that way they can only move their livestock to places where the forage has rejuvenated enough and avoid the areas that have been degraded. And by avoiding the areas that have been degraded, they give these spaces a time to rejuvenate. And as the land is rejuvenating, then through the information they have received from AfriScout, they are able to manage the rangelands properly and in that way contribute to the reduction of the effects of climate change.
PCI has also introduced the app in Ethiopia and Tanzania and says that initial results have been positive. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Science fiction has long teased consumers about a future where robots are personal assistants, but it is no longer science fiction. The recent spike in consumer-grade smart speakers that respond to voice commands of users has been given a face with the help of a self-navigating robot that listens to the command of its owners. Arashar Basadi has more.
The relationship between man and machine just got a little closer. RoboTeam is a tech startup company from Tel Aviv that designed this robot called Timmy. The robot can follow its owner and responds to voice commands. It can also be controlled using a smartphone app.
If I tap this button, Timmy locks on my body and face, and it starts following my face and body. It tracks me so I can enjoy hands-free video calls.
Timmy uses 16 sensors to help it get around and avoid falling down the stairs. But designers say its abilities to instantly map its surroundings and learn places in your home make it the perfect video conferencing technology.
If I'm abroad and I want to read my kid a bedtime story, I can press on my phone Bobby's room, and the robot will drive to Bobby's room and I can read him a bedtime story.
Wow, that's amazing.
Timmy uses technology mainly used in autonomous cars and now refined for the home. It's called LiDAR, a type of surveying method which uses lasers to measure and develop an accurate map of its surroundings. Designers say it's the first time the technology has been used in a home or office setting to avoid potential hazards in real time.
This obstacle avoidance and this navigation technology has never been achieved in home robotics by any company, and it is one of the main reasons which make this robot much more user-friendly for the home and office.
RoboTeam recently unveiled Timmy at the IFI Consumer Electronics Trade Show in Berlin. The company says end-user cost was a consideration when designing the robot, which will go on sale this October for about $1,500. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
With that, we conclude the AB News Bulletin for today. Thanks for joining us and have a pleasant day ahead. Bye-bye.